I don't even know how to begin this. How to put into words the kind of heartbreak that's been eating me up for weeks. It feels like I'm still in disbelief. Honestly, everything was fine, at least I thought it was. Megan and I were a solid couple. Not perfect, but who is? We've been married for 7 years, and our daughter, Lily, is 4. We'd always managed to keep things together, even when life threw its punches. I mean, sure, there were the normal stresses, work, bills, trying to balance it all, but we were good. We didn't fight often, and when we did, we worked through it. But then something changed. At first, I thought it was just me overthinking. I'm not usually the jealous type, but lately I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I first noticed it when she started taking her phone everywhere. Megan's always been a little private with her phone, but it was never an issue. Lately, though, she'd get these strange texts and immediately lock her screen. She'd leave the room to answer calls, which wasn't like her. And when I asked who it was, she'd say it was just work, no big deal. But the tone, the way she said it, it didn't sit right. I don't know if it's just me being paranoid, but I started noticing things like the fact that she'd barely look at me when we were watching TV together, or how she'd take an extra long time to run errands, acting like it was totally normal. I wanted to trust her. I really did, but I couldn't ignore this gnawing feeling in my gut that something wasn't adding up. It got worse after that. I found myself checking her social media, something I had never done before. And I hate admitting that now, but I was desperate, and I stumbled on something. One of her posts had a comment from someone I didn't recognize. The name was familiar, though it was a guy I'd seen around a few times. Adam, a guy she'd mentioned a few months ago as a work friend. The comment was flirty, something about looking forward to seeing you again soon. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe it was nothing. But then I couldn't stop thinking about it. What was it that they had to look forward to? Why was this Adam person constantly popping up in random conversations? I wish I could say that I confronted her about it right away, but I didn't. I tried to push it out of my mind. Maybe I was overreacting. But the more time went on, the more I found myself questioning everything. And that feeling, it wasn't going away. I'm not proud of what I did next. But one night, while she was in the shower, I picked up her phone. Just a quick glance, I told myself, nothing major. And that's when I saw it. The message thread that shattered everything. I knew I shouldn't have gone through her phone. The guilt hit me immediately, but at that point, I felt like I was drowning in doubt, and I couldn't stop myself. When I opened the messages, I froze. It wasn't just one or two innocent texts. No, it was an entire conversation, and it was more than what I'd imagined. The thread was with Adam. My stomach dropped when I saw the date, just 2 days ago. It wasn't just friendly chat. It was personal. It was intimate. Words like "can't wait to see you again" and "I miss the way you feel." My heart skipped a beat, and then a sickening sense of clarity washed over me. I knew, deep down, what was happening. I scrolled further, almost in a daze. There were photos too, nothing too explicit, but enough to tell me everything I needed to know. A few pictures of them out together, laughing, drinking, too close, too comfortable. I could feel the anger rising in me, but at the same time, I couldn't stop reading. The worst part was the way she spoke to him. The tone was so familiar, like she was talking to someone she'd known for years, someone she was comfortable with. The final message in the thread sent chills through me. It was a text from her, sent late at night, and all it said was, "I can't wait for tonight. I've been thinking about you all day." I felt like I was about to collapse. My head was spinning, my thoughts racing, but it was like time had stopped. It didn't make sense. My wife, the woman I trusted more than anything, was having an affair with a guy she called a work friend. I couldn't breathe. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking, and I had to stop myself from throwing the phone across the room. Every bit of doubt I'd been carrying for weeks came rushing to the surface, and the weight of it hit me all at once. I had to confront her. I knew that, but I couldn't bring myself to do it right then. Instead, I just sat there in the silence of our living room, trying to process what I'd just seen. The anger was building, but it wasn't just anger. It was a mix of betrayal, confusion, and, most of all, pain. It hurt more than I ever thought it would. Eventually, I got up and walked around the house, trying to clear my head. I wanted to confront her, but I also wanted to think. I needed to figure out what to do next, how to handle this. This wasn't just some casual affair. This was deep. She'd been hiding it, lying to me, playing me for a fool. But how? How had I missed all the signs? How could she have done this to me? To us? I couldn't keep it in anymore. I needed to know the truth, and I needed to hear it from her. So, I decided I would wait. I would let her think everything was normal. Let her walk around, not knowing that I knew. Because when the moment came, I wasn't going to be gentle. I was going to confront her in a way that would leave her no way to lie, no way to deny what I knew. She would have no choice but to face the consequences. The calm before the storm. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, all I saw were those messages. Her words, the photos, everything that confirmed my worst fear. My mind wouldn't stop racing, but I couldn't make myself confront her right away. I had to wait until I could do it with a clear head. The next morning, she acted like everything was normal. She kissed me goodbye before she left for work, told me she'd be home a bit late because of a meeting. I watched her go, and for the first time in our relationship, I didn't feel any love in that goodbye. It was like she was a stranger who had lied to my face. I didn't wait. As soon as she walked out the door, I knew what I had to do. I called Adam's wife. Her name is Rachel, and I didn't know her well, but we'd met a few times at parties. We were friendly enough, but nothing more than that. Honestly, I didn't even know if she'd believe me. But when I told her who I was and what I'd found, there was a silence on the other end of the line that told me everything I needed to know. Rachel was quiet for a long time, and I could hear the shock in her voice when she asked me to repeat what I'd said. I told her about the messages, about the photos, about everything. I don't think she believed me at first, but then I heard her ask, almost in disbelief, "How long has this been going on?" She said she had noticed some things too. Her husband had been acting distant, and she'd caught him texting at odd hours. But she hadn't suspected it was anything like this. After that, we spent about an hour on the phone, swapping stories and realizing how much we'd both been kept in the dark. She was angry, so angry, but there was a part of her that was just as crushed as I was. We made a plan. She agreed to meet me at my house later that evening. We didn't say much more after that. What could we say? We were two women betrayed by the same man, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense at all. When Megan got home that night, she didn't know what hit her. I didn't scream, I didn't shout, I just told her to sit down. She looked at me like I was crazy, but she didn't question me. Not at first. "I know," I said, watching her face freeze. Her eyes went wide, but she didn't say anything at first. Then came the defense. "What are you talking about?" she asked, trying to sound casual, like she had no idea what I was referring to. I didn't waste time with her denials. I pulled her phone out of my pocket and showed her the screenshots. The ones with Adam's text, the ones with the pictures. Her face went pale. She stammered at first. "It's not what you think. This isn't what it looks like." But I wasn't having it. I didn't want to hear the lies anymore. I'd seen enough. I told her I knew everything that I knew about Adam, about the affair. I watched her face change as the truth sank in. The denial was gone, replaced with something else, something darker. "I can explain," she started, but I interrupted her. I didn't want to hear any more excuses. Not from her, not after everything. "You don't have to explain. You've already made your choices," I said. My voice was calm, but there was a bitterness behind it that I couldn't hide. And that's when she broke. Not in the way I expected, though. She didn't cry. She didn't beg for forgiveness. She just sat there, silent, as if she were already checked out of the conversation. "I'm sorry," she said finally. But it didn't feel like a real apology. It felt empty. I stood up, pacing. I felt a mix of disgust and disbelief. That's it? You think that's enough?" She didn't answer me. She just sat there, looking at her hands. The air between us was thick with tension. I couldn't understand how she could be so calm. How could she sit there after everything we'd built together and act like nothing mattered? It was in that moment that I made my decision. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't just going to walk away. I'd loved her for years, but she wasn't the person I thought she was. If she could betray me so casually, then I had no reason to protect her anymore. "I've got a little surprise for you," I said, and that's when I called Rachel. I heard the shock in Megan's voice when Rachel's voice came through the phone. "Megan, it's Rachel. We need to talk." Megan's face turned as white as a ghost. She started to stammer again, but this time there was no pretending. There was no hiding. It was over. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't just confronting her anymore. I was taking my life back. And I wasn't going to stop until she understood the consequences of what she had done. The room felt suffocating as Rachel's voice echoed through the phone. It was like everything slowed down in that moment. Megan's face twisted with confusion, and then came the panic, the sudden realization that she wasn't in control anymore. She tried to reach for her phone, to hang up, but it was too late. "Why don't you tell him what's been going on, Megan?" Rachel's voice came through the speaker, firm and cold. I had never heard her like this before. Or should I? I watched as Megan's face turned from shock to fury. She shot me a look, one I couldn't quite read, but there was a mix of guilt and rage in it. She was trying to compose herself, to act like nothing had changed, but it was too late. The mask had slipped. The curtain had fallen. Megan's response was sharp. "You have no idea what you're talking about, Rachel." But Rachel didn't back down. "I know everything, Megan. I know what's been happening. So don't act like this is just a misunderstanding." I watched as Megan's defense crumbled. She knew she was caught. The lies she'd told me, the way she'd hidden everything, it was all exposed now. And still, she didn't apologize. She didn't say she was sorry for betraying me. She didn't even try to explain herself. Instead, she tried to shift the blame. "You're just doing this to get back at me. You don't know anything about what's been going on between Adam and me. You don't understand." At that point, I couldn't keep quiet anymore. "Stop. Just stop," I said, cutting her off. "I'm done listening to your excuses. You've been lying to me. You've been lying to both of us. And you thought you could just keep playing us like fools." I saw the anger flash in her eyes. But there was something else there too, fear. She knew it was over. She knew I wasn't going to just let her walk away this time. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice almost trembling. For a second, I almost felt something. Maybe regret, maybe guilt. But then I reminded myself of everything that had happened. This wasn't a moment for sympathy. I turned away from her, and that's when I made my move. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. Rachel was waiting outside, and when she saw me, she gave me a small nod, an understanding look that said everything we needed to say. She wasn't there to make this easy for Megan. Megan looked at us, her eyes wide. "What are you doing? You can't do this." But I wasn't listening to her anymore. I stepped out of the house, motioning for Rachel to follow me. We didn't say anything as we walked to the backyard. This wasn't just about her affair anymore. This was about me reclaiming control. This was about showing Megan that actions have consequences. When I reached the backyard, I turned to Rachel. She looked at me, and for the first time in a while, I felt a sense of solidarity. We were in this together. As we both stood there, Megan stepped into the backyard, hesitating at first, then walking toward us with a mix of confusion and fury. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "You think this is going to change anything? You think bringing Rachel here makes you the winner? You're just being petty." I shook my head. "No, Megan, this isn't about winning. It's about the truth finally coming out. You thought you could keep lying to me, to both of us, but now you get to see what happens when you take people for granted." Rachel stepped forward and spoke to Megan, her voice unshaken. "I never thought I'd be in this position, but here we are. You've hurt both of us, and now we're going to make sure you remember what happens when you destroy trust." Megan's face twisted in a mix of anger and shame, but there was nothing left for her to hide behind anymore. I wasn't going to let her spin this in her favor. I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed, pretending like nothing had happened. I could see in her eyes that she realized this was the end of her affair, of our marriage, and of everything we'd built. She had nowhere to run. I didn't shout. I didn't cause a scene. I just stood there, letting the weight of the situation sink in. And Megan? She stood there, frozen, unsure of how to react. She didn't beg. She didn't apologize. In the end, she just turned around, walked back inside, and slammed the door behind her. And that was it. I didn't chase after her. I didn't try to fix anything. I didn't have to. I knew then that I was done. The pain of the betrayal still stung, but in that moment I felt something else too. It wasn't relief. It wasn't satisfaction. But it was the beginning of moving forward. And that's exactly what I did. The silence in the house was deafening. Megan hadn't said a word to me since the confrontation, and I hadn't spoken to her either. It was like we were both caught in this strange limbo where everything felt unreal, but we couldn't ignore the truth anymore. I spent the next few days in a haze. I didn't know what to do or where to go from here. My mind kept replaying everything. Her betrayal, the lies, the way she acted like it was all normal until it exploded in my face. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. How could I? The person I thought I knew, the person I trusted, had been living a double life, and I didn't even see it coming. She barely left her room. I think she was waiting for me to talk to her, to fix things. But I wasn't going to be the one to do that. Not anymore. I was done. Rachel kept in touch with me over the next week. She was hurting too, but I could tell she was also relieved. She didn't have to carry the weight of the secret anymore, and I think that brought her some peace. We talked about what we were both going through, how it felt to have our worlds turned upside down, and how the trust we had in our marriages was shattered. It wasn't easy, but something about talking to her, sharing our pain, made me feel like I wasn't alone in all of this. It helped to know that someone else understood. We even talked about what came next. Neither of us knew for sure what we were going to do, but we both knew one thing. We had to keep moving forward. Megan tried to talk to me a couple of times, but I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I couldn't look at her without remembering everything I'd seen. And every time she tried to explain herself, I just couldn't hear it. She had no explanation that was worth listening to. I kept myself busy. I spent more time with Lily, trying to give her the stability she deserved, even though my world felt like it was falling apart. I wasn't sure what would happen with Megan, but I knew I couldn't let this destroy my relationship with my daughter. She needed me to be strong, and I couldn't afford to fall apart now. But the hardest part came when I started thinking about the future. Was I going to stay with Megan? Could I ever trust her again? I didn't know the answer. I was still too angry, too hurt to make that decision. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her dictate my life anymore. One night, I sat down and made a list of everything I wanted for myself. It was a simple list: peace of mind, trust, happiness, a future where I didn't feel like I was constantly looking over my shoulder. And in that list, Megan wasn't a part of the picture. I wasn't ready to make a permanent decision, but I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I had to start thinking about my own healing, my own happiness. And as painful as it was, I knew that meant letting go of the person who had betrayed me. Megan came to me a few days later, tearfully asking if there was any chance we could fix this. She apologized again, told me how sorry she was, but the words felt hollow. She kept asking me to give her another chance, but I couldn't. I couldn't just forget what she'd done, and I couldn't go back to a life where I was constantly questioning her, wondering if she was lying to me again. I told her that I needed time, that I couldn't make a decision right then, but I needed space. I'll never forget the look on her face when I said that. It wasn't just sadness. It was like she was losing the last bit of control she had. But I didn't care anymore. I was done living for someone else's happiness. I had to start living for my own. It's been a few months now, and things have settled in a way I never thought they would. When I look back at everything that happened, I don't recognize the person I was before all of this. There's a strength in me now that I didn't know I had, and it's like the pieces of my life are slowly starting to fall back into place, but in a new way. Megan and I have barely spoken. I moved out. I didn't tell her I was leaving. I just packed my things one afternoon, took Lily with me, and found a small apartment. It wasn't glamorous or anything, but it was mine, and I needed that. I needed to start fresh, without the constant reminder of the lies, the betrayals. I thought about confronting her again, telling her all the things I'd never said, but I realized I didn't need that. She didn't deserve my closure. The real closure I needed came from accepting what had happened and accepting that I couldn't change it. I started therapy. I figured it was the only way I could fully understand the depths of my pain and learn how to rebuild trust, whether it was with myself or with anyone else in the future. The sessions have helped, but it's been tough. There are days when I'm angry all over again. Days when I catch myself wondering if I'll ever be able to trust anyone the way I trusted her. But I keep going. I keep working on it because I know that if I don't, I'll never move on. Lily's doing better too. She's adjusting to the changes, though I can tell she misses the way things used to be. I'm trying my best to make sure she feels loved and supported. Her well-being comes first, and I won't let anything else get in the way of that. And then there's Rachel. She and I have become unlikely friends. We talk almost every week now, mostly about the kids and how we're each adjusting. It's still strange, but there's this sense of understanding between us. We've both been through hell in different ways, but there's a quiet camaraderie in that shared experience. It's not easy, but it's helped to have someone who gets it. Megan reached out to me a few times, asking if we could talk, but I told her I wasn't ready. Maybe I'll never be ready. I don't know. But what I do know is that I'm not the same person I was when I was with her. And that's something I have to accept. I've realized that forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about me finding peace within myself. I'm not sure if I'll ever fully forgive Megan, and maybe that's okay. What matters now is that I'm healing, and I'm taking control of my own life. I don't know what the future holds, whether I'll ever be in another relationship, whether I'll ever trust someone the way I once trusted her. But for now, I'm focused on me. I'm focused on finding the peace I deserve and building a life I can be proud of. I think that's the best revenge I can get. Not by doing something petty, not by trying to hurt anyone in return, but by living my life in a way that makes me stronger. By becoming the person I want to be, not the one I was when I was waiting for someone else's love to define me. So here I am, taking it day by day, trying to rebuild what was broken. And though I'm still angry, still hurt, I know this. I'm going to be okay. More than okay. I'm going to thrive.